Yes, guys, what is going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Adapt Performance Podcast. This episode was sick, and I know I say it every single episode, but I genuinely believe it that this is gonna be a really enjoyable listen, a really impactful listen for you, particularly if you are a rugby player. Okay, so we've got Wright on the podcast today. If you haven't checked out his social media, go check that out because it's absolutely sick. You know, he gives out so much free value there for rugby players, and you can even apply a lot of the concepts into other field-based sports. So go and check that out. In terms of what we cover today, we're going to go through. I'll list off the questions, but essentially, where do we feel sport-specific movements and using things like bands and cables as a way of replicating sporting movements sits within a strength and conditioning program? We're then going to go through what we believe is the best split for rugby. So where you should put your strength and conditioning efforts and what you should do within each of those days. What is the best pushing or pressing-based exercise for rugby? And then we're going to go into how do we know if you're doing enough? How do we know if you're doing enough gym-based work? And, we're really going to kind of dig into these topics in a really nice way. So this podcast, sick. What I want from you then, obviously we're giving you incredible value here. I'm going to say it. Share this with somebody who you feel like may benefit. Okay. Just send it to a pal, send it to a teammate, just send it to everybody. Tell your nan about it because your nan needs to know. So yeah, without further ado then, do us a favor, send it around, give us 5 stars on Spotify, do something on Apple Podcasts if you use Apple. I don't really know about that one. I'm a bit of an Android guy, so Apple just escapes me. But yeah, do us a favor. Without further ado, let's get into the podcast. Here comes some value. Yes, mate. How's it going? Welcome to the Adapt Performance Podcast, mate. Thanks for coming on.
Awesome, absolute sort of privilege to be on, mate. Like really, really happy you are. So I actually listened to a few of your podcasts before, so yeah, really excited. It's my first one, and yeah, quite happy to kind of come on and chat all things rugby, all things S&C.
You're trying to sweet talk me, mate. You're trying to use flattery. That's what you're trying to do. No, it's good, mate. It was a no-brainer for me. Obviously we're involved in similar spaces in terms of some of the athletes that we're working with. So I thought it'd just be a great opportunity just to get you on. Let's chat shit for a little bit, go through rugby, put different ideas to people. But I think before we get going, mate, do you want to give us a little bit of an intro of who you are, what you do, and what you do? Yeah, let's go with that.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm Harry. I'm one half of kind of Train Up Performance, bit of a page on Instagram, S&C coach by trade, and then also kind of specialising with the injury rehab side of things as well. So a little bit of kind of a breakdown from where I started. Keen rugby player, grew up playing rugby with my brother. Just loved it. Lived and breathed kind of rugby. Then went off to uni, studied in sort of S&C rehab and sports massage, which is real practical learning. I'm a bit of a practical learner. I don't really want to be sat in lecture theatres the whole time. So it's a perfect fit. I got to play rugby, got to learn and enjoy my studies. I had some real good kind of mentees there. I had who did I have? John Radner, people like that, which were great and kind of almost pushing me in the right direction of S&C. It wasn't all being, book smart. They actually taught me some real good lessons. I know you've had Dan Howes on, who's really good around those kind of soft skills and how you build rapport with athletes and relationships and stuff like that. So I had that side of things from the degree, and I was really lucky that I was able to kind of lean on them and learn that side of things. I'd say I'm a bit of a people person anyway. And that kind of led me into, when we were at uni, you got to do a work placement. So I think you had to do 150 hours or something like that. And I worked with the YPC. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's like the development centre in Wales. So you work with tennis players, hockey players. We work with Welsh rowing and stuff like that. And I just got my sort of teeth stuck into coaching and just being on the gym floor. And they were really good because they kind of oversee you. And they were like, right, Harry, you go for it. You take an athlete. And then, I didn't really know what I wanted to do after uni. But after that kind of experience, I thought, right, I'd love to go down the S&C route, especially working with like the youth. I think you see a lot of change and you see those like big periods of development, and you kind of then see them flourish when they go into like the senior setup. So that was a real good experience, kind of honed down on some skills with, those interpersonal skills and building a bit of a coaching philosophy as well. And now I was kind of lucky enough to kind of graduate from uni, but before I graduated, a job application came up, and it's back home. So I'm from Exeter, or just outside of Exeter. Grew up in Exeter, and there was a job going at Exeter Chiefs, and I thought, right, John, what do you reckon? Do you reckon I just chuck an application in? And at this point, I think I literally just handed in my dissertation. And he was like, look, there's no harm in applying, even if you get an interview. It's a great experience. It's a win-win. You can't lose from it. So I thought, right, I'm going to chuck in an application. Got nothing to lose. All my mates were like, well, you're not even qualified yet. You're not gonna get anything. Anyway, managed to get an interview. And yeah, they offered me the job there and then. And I was very lucky. But if I didn't, like you say, if you don't ask, you don't get. And it was one of those things that I kind of just shut myself in, 2 feet, full steam ahead. And from there on in, graduated, and I kind of worked at Exeter Chiefs for, I did 4.5 seasons, and was an academy S&C coach. And then because I had the kind of rehab background, which I think probably gave me a little bit of a different point of view from the application point of view, they were happy with that because it almost meant that they could cut some corners with regards to physios in the academy setup. And I ended up sort of taking on like the lead academy rehab role. So that was brilliant, mate. I worked one-on-one with loads of athletes, and then oversaw their kind of return to play from post-op all the way through to full fitness. And then also I was doing S&C with the younger years as well. But had some great experiences there for the 4.5 seasons. Able to spend loads of time with physios, in with the first team as well. So day-to-day life in and around Sandy Park and seeing what was going on. And when I was there, they won the double, and they won a couple of premiership titles. So there's a massive kind of buzz around the place. And then COVID hit, and COVID was one of those periods where I was on furlough for sort of 6 months in the end. And it was a really good time for me, because it was actually, you take a step back and you're able to kind of reflect and go, what is going on in the future? Where do I want to go? And I was really lucky that being part of Exeter Chiefs, those are the kind of CPD opportunities going on. I know England Rugby did loads of sort of chats and Zoom calls, which was brilliant. And then it kind of got me thinking, and I thought, right, I'm just going to start an Instagram page just to start documenting my own training. Had my brother at home as well, when he was actually signed at Exeter Chiefs as well. So he was in like the senior academy setup, and breaking a few rules. We had a few of the academy lads come over to my mum and dad's at the time, and we had a bit of a gym set up, and we were just, getting off the gym, going to the pitch, doing some running sessions. So we knew that when those boys returned into the club, they weren't at sort of a real bad physical state. So we made use of that time and went back into Chiefs, and it was a real weird period because we had the whole senior academy at the almost junior academy set up, and it was a little bit of a phase in for those players. They started with 20 players in the senior squad, and then they would just filter in. So kind of my job was to make sure that those boys were ready to, return into the club in some real good physical state, and they were going to be able to cope with the demands of back to full training, and hopefully to start post-COVID. And then it came to the decision, mate. I kind of was carrying on my Instagram page and then doing some programming alongside of things, but it's very much a side hustle. And then it started kind of taking over. I was really enjoying it. I was working with people all around, and it was just something fresh for me to kind of get my teeth stuck into. And it gets to a point where you got to choose one or the other, and one's got to give. So if I was to choose Chiefs, Train Wright was going to have to give, and I decided to go for the Train Wright route. So I left Chiefs in September 2022, and since then the rest has been history. So just starting to work with a lot more. I've kind of niched down with more rugby players. That is my background. That's what I've worked with previously. But yeah, really enjoying it and kind of doing some one-to-one work. And I also stepped in last year as I kind of phased out of Chiefs. I actually took on some lecturing. So I did some lecturing for a year as well at the college, which is a great one. Just had some kind of skill set delivering in a classroom, which I think is really beneficial. Different way of teaching, different way of learning. And like I said earlier about kind of building those interpersonal relationships, being able to stand in front of the classroom for an hour and talk a load of waffle is quite a good skill to have. So as you can tell, I'm rambling on now. But that's what I've kind of got, those skills to kind of talk the talk, hopefully. So yeah, that's kind of
mate. I
job,
think
really.
As you were kind of going through that, Yeah, mate, as you were going, there seems to be so many similarities in your journey through S&C and mine, actually. And
Right.
I didn't really realize, but I have a massage, well, I did realize, but I have a massage background as well. So I did like a
Yeah.
PT and, sports massage course. And I thought that was really
Yeah.
interesting. I enjoyed that. And that was probably the start of me getting into S&C, I guess.
Yeah.
But also kind of echoing what you said there, like COVID and I sound it's rough, isn't it? 'Cause you don't want to sound insensitive, but COVID was probably one of the best things that happened for me in terms of
Yeah.
lifestyle and professionally, actually, because exactly the same. I just got buzzing when I got furloughed and I had an opportunity to do 5 a.m. sessions on Canva, and just
Yeah.
get really like try and make stuff and be that type of thing. So, yeah, it's
Yeah.
cool. Also, did a little bit of lecturing last year. And you know what? I
Right.
don't think it's my future, but I know what you were saying around being able to stand in front of a group of people in a different setting is really nice. And I can never shake being a little bit of I swear a lot and I'm all for it. And I used to be a little bit like,
Yeah.
oh, should I change it? Should I try and tone it down? But in the end, it's nah. If I've got a lad in my mind actually who I call a gobshite, and I still stick to it. He is an absolute gobshite, and I still speak to him
Yeah.
now. I had to do a reference for him yesterday, and I just, yeah, I think lecturing's really cool, and I think it hones your craft in a really different way. But yeah, that sounds sick, mate. We obviously put out a little bit of a Q&A yesterday, and I've
Yeah.
got some questions written down here that I think would be
Yeah.
really nice to get into. Get your take on some of these questions, and then I'll give you a little bit of back and forth on it if there's anything that's
Yeah. 100%.
different, and we'll see how far we get with these, mate. We'll see. But I think the first one actually that is probably a good one to get into and kind of see where we end up with it is well, I'll ask the question as it's written. So, what is the best push exercise for rugby then?
That's push exercise. I think you've obviously got both ends of the spectrum with regards to what you're trying to get out of those push exercises. There's so many that you can program throughout a pre-season, off-season, in-season. Your gold standards of your bench press options, your overhead pressing options as well, are going to always be up there. But I think it's finding a balance of both. Like I know from what stuff you've put out as well, and I'm a big believer in as well. Like I've had a fair few shoulder injuries, and I think if you stick to your fixed position, so where your back is flat on a bench the whole time, you can kind of come unstuck when you get into the chaos of rugby, where you need your scapula to move and be able to follow your arm, and getting really strong in dumbbell bench and dumbbell shoulder overhead is going to have great benefits. But I think then also when you get into that chaos where you need your arm to come out into those vulnerable positions, you need that scap to be able to move. I think if we get caught where we're just literally sitting our scaps back and down, we become really decompressed, and our shoulder actually loses its function. So then they're going to be brilliant for building our strength and our power, but also we're going to need exercises to allow that scapula to move around that rib cage. So things like your landmine presses, your cable press options, actually rather than having your back sucked against the bench, just taking it away. So whether you're in like a Z position, whether you're in a half kneeling, and I think that's just the best way to get the most out of your pressing option. So I wouldn't say just have one or the other. I think it's almost supplementing both of those, and making sure you've got some functional shoulders to go into rugby. It's not all about how much you can bench and lift overhead. I think if you're looking for sports performance, you're going to need the kind of best of both worlds. I don't know what you think there, George, with regards to that.
Mate, I agree, and I think when I usually read these types of questions of like the best push exercise for rugby and that type of thing, and it's quite leading in a sense because they want one particular
Is
exercise. Um, and the reality of sports performance and the human body in general is there is no one best thing, because you could have 10
yeah,
people in front of you, 10 players in front of you. You've had 3 shoulder dislocations, so you would suit this type of exercise. You've had no training history whatsoever, so you would suit this one. And then you start getting into the logistics of it of like, I could tell you the best pressing exercise for rugby is a landmine shoulder press. You come back at me and say,
Yeah.
I don't have a landmine though. And then you're down this rabbit hole of like, okay, we need to have an idea of what our gold standard is. What we want a healthy, high performance shoulder to be able to do, like you spoke about, is, can you handle contacts? Can you push in a variety of ways in pain-free movement? Can you do that at speed? Can you do that whilst fatigued? Can you do that when, you've got somebody behind you that's restricting the shoulder blade movement? Do you have the preparedness to deal with all those things? And you know what? I would have, realistically, I probably have like 4 or 5 push exercises that I really like. Ones that I'm like, these generally tick a lot of my boxes, and I'm not married to them, but it's more like the philosophy of what I want a high performing shoulder to be able to do. I like a bench press, I'm not against it to myself, and I think it can build really strong triceps, chest, shoulders. I think it can give you the ability to have a really high performing shoulder. If you only do bench press, that is probably where you'll run into a little bit of issues. Okay. And I like to do a certain amount of work where we have the shoulder blade free, like you mentioned before. So that might be press up movements, that might be a landmine, that might be doing, those types of things. Yeah. Is there anything there that you kind of disagree with, or is that all kind of aligned with how you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. I work with my press movements. I'd always like to have horizontal, that sort of 45 and a vertical press in my program probably throughout the week. Whether that's dumbbell bench, whether that's a heavy banded push up, which I love because you've got so many things going on there with that push up, working floor based movement, co-contractions that have elbow, shoulder, bits and bobs like that, and then again letting that shoulder move through some retraction and protraction, and then landmine based work as well. I think, like talking back now, going back to when I was working at Chiefs, but some of the first sort of pressing movements that we would be doing is our press ups, and then we'd actually work into landmine variation from a standing to a kneeling to a tall kneeling, before going into the dumbbell benches. But I think having some dumbbell variations in there, and it all comes down to the athlete, like what do they actually need? Do they need out and out strength? If they need out and out strength, then probably your dumbbell benches, your dumbbell shoulder presses are gonna be the one. If they've got past history of shoulder dislocations and whatnot, then we can challenge them a little bit more. But again, having that free motion, getting press ups, getting landmine presses in, even if it's kind of warm up work, just making sure they've got that ability to do that as well.
What you mentioned there, which I want to kind of draw upon, is I think about pressing in the same way. Loosely characterize it as pure horizontal. So that might be your press ups, your bench press, your dumbbell chest press, whatever. Do something on a little bit of an incline, more of a 45. So you're talking incline bench press, having your feet elevated. So you're then kind of doing a press up in a slightly different position, then doing something pure overhead. So you've got 3 basic options there of ways to get the chest and the shoulder and everything around that structure really nice. But don't just stick with barbell variations for every single one of them. You could almost treat it as a little bit of a rotation thing. Okay, I'm going to do one of those 3 movements a week. Okay, and I'm going to do one of those movements using a barbell. I'm going to do one of those movements using dumbbells where I have a little bit more of a stability challenge. And then I'm going to do one of those movements free, so a body weight variation or something where there's pure movement and I really have to stabilize in space. And you know what? You probably wouldn't go too far wrong if you stuck with that type of philosophy for a while and then do a decent amount of, pure rotator cuff work or individual, let's say prehab, something that is specific to the way that your shoulders move, your injury history and the types of rugby that you play. But yeah, I feel like we've given plenty there, mate. And ultimately, it comes back to that idea of there's no one best exercise for anything, really, because we definitely need a little bit more context. We could probably see you and be like, you know what, this is probably the variation that's going to suit you best for the next 4 months. And then we renegotiate, because sometimes you will just stop getting adaptations from that thing. And this actually really kind of follows really nicely into a second question, actually. And it is around, I guess, the sport specific side, and I'm going to butcher the way that he asked it, so I do apologize. But where do
Okay.
you sit when it comes down to training individual sport movements with things like cables and bands and weighted things? So we're talking about, okay, being able to replicate a pass with, a band, or replicating a kick by using cables as a way of overloading that movement. Where do you sit with
The
that type of thing?
So it's a real interesting one and quite a hot topic. I know there's been a few videos that kind of do the rounds, and I think they can almost be misinterpreted. And what actually are they doing that in their gym session, or are they doing that as a technical kind of top up session? Now, from past experience, it's been when I was at Chiefs, there was actually a little bit of a probably a phase actually where rugby coaches were coming into the gym and we had our S&C sessions, and rugby coaches are coming in and going, right, you're resting, you're not doing anything. Let's do some skills in between, which is absolutely fine because if it's not going to take too much away from their gym session, then absolutely fine. One thing I did find was, if we're going after some strength stuff and our coaches are coming in during their rest periods and started making them doing banded passes and whatnot, actually it just starts taking away from their strength work and their number one kind of priority at that moment in time. There's always going to be conversations there from a pro setting, actually going, look, gym time's the gym. We're going to work on some real physical qualities in here. When they get out onto the pitch, that's when you can do your technical work. And that's kind of where we went with it. However, working with rehabbers, it was a great opportunity for me in those sessions to actually add in balance and proprioception, and that may be Samuel Bosu ball and doing some catch and pass because they haven't caught a ball in how many months or how many weeks. So it's a great way to kind of get best bang for your buck. So I kind of see it from that point. Now, if we've got players, I would never program a cable pass for a number 9 because I just think there's other ways to kind of develop that strength and power, which will hopefully have that kind of transfer onto the pitch. Now, if you are a seasoned pro and you're looking for those 1%ers, then 100% do it because they need that. But people that aren't at the top, I probably think you're better off doing that out on the pitch rather than doing your banded pass or trying to replicate a line out lift, for example, in the gym. Actually, let's get really strong in the gym. Let's get really strong with the muscles that are required to provide a decent line out lift. So lower body into transferring some upper body lifts. So we may do a push press in one of their power sessions, which is going to have great transfer. But actually, is it going to make you better at line out lifting? Probably not. You're going to probably need to go and speak to your forwards coach and actually get some technical cues and timing and bits and bobs like that. So keep that for the field. That's probably my kind of take on it. Probably a little bit stuck in my ways from the S&C point of view and try and keep S&C. And then the coaches, if you want to make them better technically, that's your kind of job. But there's always going to be that sort of crossover point where actually there's going to be a little bit of give there. Actually, do you know what? I can probably implement some of this in their session. If it's a low intensity session, I may be able to chuck some bits in there. Some scrum shapes are always going to have some really good sort of benefits anyway in the gym, and we can work some core anti-rotation work as well. But probably from the Pomp video that I've seen, it wouldn't surprise me if that was actually a technical skill session that he was doing, but he was using almost the potentiation effect of cables into pass. He wants to improve his passing speed and passing power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's that video that we're kind of on about, that I kind of used as a little bit of a reference earlier. That's the first time I've seen that, actually.
Yeah.
But all sports are very similar in the sense that we do want an element of sport specificity in our training because we all feel like our sport is so far removed from what S&C is. And I think it's a little bit of an education piece. I feel like it's when we go in the gym for the most part, we're trying to create this physically robust, this strong, this fast, this fit body that can do all of our sport specific skills and kicking and throwing and punching, whatever that sport is. And the biggest bang for your buck for most people is treat those two things as separate for a little while. We kind of spoke about that. What you did say, which I thought was really, really interesting, and this is not necessarily something I've experimented with from a rugby perspective of trying to replicate, passing a ball, but you said around potentiation. I thought that was super interesting. And for anyone that isn't necessarily sure what potentiation is, it is the idea of doing an exercise with a certain amount of weight is going to
Yeah.
essentially prime the central nervous system and the muscles around the body to be able to produce more force. So, for example, going from, a heavy medicine ball throw into a rugby pass, that type of thing. In
Yeah.
other sports, we do that as well. So it's popular in boxing. They might do something like a landmine punch, okay, and then go into a punch. And that has, that might receive a decent amount of stick on social media as well, because it is used as a marketing tool ultimately, because we all like to see our sports skill. We all like to hear that this is going to improve your whatever. But we won't go down that rabbit hole. However, the idea of potentiation is a genuine thing, and doing something weighted. So, for example, you could do sprints this way. You could do resisted sprints, with a sled. Okay, do 10-meter accelerations with a sled with 10% of your body weight. Rest for a little bit, and then go into normal sprints. No resisted element to it, and you will find that you absolutely fly. So that does have worth, and I feel, if I was to break this down, like the sports specificity side is really interesting, and people argue about this until the day they die. If we look at sports that are very almost one-dimensional, let's say, and I know it doesn't really exist, but let's take something like boxing, okay? Because I think it's an easy way to understand, because you've got two hands, you've got two weapons, and that is your tools. And people will try and say, right, we're gonna do medicine ball throws or whatever to improve your punch. Well, you got two punches, okay? You got two hands, we can do that. But also start looking at all the little differences within that punch, okay? You've got a right hand, you've now got a right hook, you've now got an uppercut, you've got an overhand right, you've got it off of a step, you've got it off of a back foot. You've got 1,000,001 different scenarios where you're going to have to try and produce force into that specific thing. So you can see how it'd be an absolute fucking nightmare trying to pick an exercise which improves that singular thing. So now try and take that into a rugby scenario where you might have a 1 foot leading. You might be doing it off of as a jog. You might be doing it when you're tired. It gets really kind of iffy. And then you just go back to a point of, let's just get you really strong and robust so that you can do skills. What's your thoughts on that little ramble, mate? Because I just went off. I need a drink.
I completely agree. I think just speaking prior then, I think actually, if you think about what we do in the gym, a lot of those exercises do transfer into sport specific movements. Now, we've got our medicine ball throws. Now you can say that's sport specific, that's replicating a pass, or you've got a jammer press and a jammer throw, and you can say that's sport specific, that's replicating a handoff. It is. That's the reason they're probably in the program, because that's what you want to kind of replicate, and you want to see them get stronger in those specific movements. But that's only going to be a very small percentage of the makeup of that weekly schedule or that program or that block of training. And I think funny with the boxing, like we've worked with boxers, and actually it really comes down to their training age. If their training age is really low, then we're not going to give them real sport specific exercises, because they're probably not going to get that much of a benefit from it. So actually, because they're used to, when I say training age, I don't mean their sport, I mean actually in their gym, because I've worked with loads of like MMA fighters, combat sports, where they've done no gym, they've literally just trained and fought and stuff, and they're good technically. So actually, we can get them physically strong, and that might be just doing the kind of fundamentals of your squat, push, pull, hinge, brace, lunge, that sort of thing. They're going to get great transfer. So, mate, I think it's a real fine line, and I think it comes down to a lot of different things that individuals need, their training age, what their coaches want, where their holes are in their performance, and what they need to improve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just as you're going through that, and you mentioned that essentially all exercises are sport specific, and it is. You can easily say that because you're using muscles and you're using joints that are relative to that sport in most cases. And I'm thinking back to I don't know if you've ever seen the javelin thrower. He did the rounds a while ago. Johan Vetter. I don't know if you've ever seen him train him.
No, I haven't. There's another guy though, called Benji Pearson. Don't know if you've seen him. He's a javelin thrower as well, but he's probably on the same lines. I haven't heard of the guy that you mentioned, but I might have to look him up after this.
Yeah. And the idea being, if you look at his training, you'll be like, you can see how it replicates elements of the javelin throw in a lot of the movements that he uses. He has some very
Yeah,
highly specialized exercises within it and some really cool contraptions, actually. Um, but we are talking about an Olympic level world record holder that's been, doing strength and conditioning for 25 years
yeah,
and will improving his trap bar deadlift from 310 kilo to 312 kilo. Will that make a difference, or will that just essentially put him at a little bit of an extra risk? Which, it's one of those. We all have different philosophies to an extent, and you could go on a different podcast, mate, and you might get a totally different input from their host. But what I do want to kind of go back to here is when we start thinking about, let's take kicking, for example, there are studies on certain elements of kicking. Okay. So
yeah,
you might have to get a little bit creative when you start looking at what sports it's from and take that with an element of salt. However, there's been, studies on Taekwondo. Okay. The kick might look a little bit different, but it's still a kick. And what you
yeah,
start to see from stuff like that is kicking velocity is linked to pelvis and thigh speed. Okay. Well, pelvis and thigh speed is highly correlated with vertical jump performance. Okay. So you could go so far as saying, well, improve your vertical jump and we're going to improve your kicking, capacity, your ability to do that thing. And you think of it like a car, and a driver. We can give you the most physically robust body in the world, and that is your car. We can give you the tools and we can give you the ability to be super explosive. But you need to be able to drive that thing. You need to be able
yeah,
to have the skills to know where to put your foot at what time, how fast you need to go into that kick and at what time. So, and you know what? That could probably be, an answer for a majority of these questions, to be honest with you. But
yeah.
yeah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I totally agree. I think like going back to almost the javelin, they're training for one specific thing, and that one specific thing is to throw that javelin as far as they can. So I think it's probably a lot easier for them to take that sport specific training philosophy and implement it into their weekly training. Whereas, you know, if we're just training the rugby pass, all right, you may be good at passing, but you've got to do a heap load of other things as well on that rugby pitch. So it's it's that fine balance. And I think what do we really need? We need a real strong base. And if we've got a real good base of fundamental strength, then I always like to use almost the pyramid scale and making sure that if we've got a bigger base, our pyramid's going to be taller and we're going to be able to get to that, hopefully reach our potential of ceiling or ceiling of potential. So it's just making sure that you've got fundamentals first, and you don't. They're like young rugby players as well. You got to be really careful that you don't just skip the fundamental stage and you go straight to the sport specific stuff. That's what you're seeing on Instagram. You'll mix a heap load of development, and actually your feeling of potential will come right down. So just really focus on those fundamentals, get really strong, move well, and then when you've got that kind of training age and you've developed that strength and power, then we can start turning into sport specific movements. I think that you'll see the pros do it, but they've been there, got the badge, and that's why they're able to do it and put some focus on the specific stuff.
Yeah. And, I guess the final point before we move on with that is, for me anyway, this is the way I would probably coach in a majority of the time is I will try to educate. I'll try to give you all the information that, we've just kind of gone through. And if
Yeah,
you're still in a situation where you're like, you know what, I realized that, from a physical standpoint, I might not be making my game too much better by including this type of sport specific exercise, but it really helps me mentally to do this type of thing and use it as an icing on the cake type of exercise. As long
mm-hmm.
as we're aware of the drawbacks, and it does help build a little bit of buy-in. It gets you buzzing about a session. It allows you to connect a little bit better with that training because you've got a really nice theme going on amongst that training day. And I will use that. I would steer away from doing 90% of that type of work. But you know what? If we've got your squats, your lunges, your dead, all that type of thing, and you've ticked those boxes for me, the same as we'll give rugby players a shitload of arms, mate. You know what? You can have arms and you can have some sport specific stuff. Like it's cool. I want you to enjoy training. I want you to be able to drive this vehicle with us. So yeah, I think that's a really good place to finish with that one, mate. And
Yeah,
we're going to get into probably some very it depends questions here, but let's try and give as much context and a good answer with it. So, what do you feel is the best weights split for rugby? So, if you had to kind of design a training week for somebody going in the gym, how would that look for you?
It depends. But
Mhm.
with as little context as that, I think it's, for me, it comes down to that individual, comes down to their needs, what they need to improve on, where their kind of holes are in their performance, where they are from a development point of view. If we're talking, let's just take me for example. Off season's a great time to kind of work on some weaknesses, work on some areas that I would like to develop, and that might be actually like what you just alluded to. You want to be enjoying your training. You've got some time off your training there, so it's time to actually start enjoying the gym sessions. You're not beating your body up, so your body should be feeling fairly fresh. So I may try something different. I may go down the route of a push-pull leg, which is a little bit of a change up, but I'm able to get some decent training volume in. I'm enjoying my training, and I can go off to some size and strength. It's the perfect time to do it. In season now, I like to go full bodies. So this is like my kind of preferred way. If I'm working with someone that works at 9 to 5, I will go three full body sessions, and that will be hopefully trying to get the most out of those sessions. So they played on Saturday. Monday would be a full body session with probably a little bit more of an upper body bias, and we'd probably focus on a little more volume, so some hypertrophy work. 2 reasons: it's probably the best time in the week to do it, because you may still be a little bit sore, so it's a great way to promote some blood flow, get you feeling really good, and kind of set you up for the week. So you've got that kind of stimulus in, and then that will set you up for a nice strength day on the Wednesday, which I kind of will get our most intensity in. And then on the Friday, I like to use that kind of pack. So I'll use like a priming session. I'm not one that likes personally to kind of rest the day before a game. I like to kind of do something, and done a little bit of research in and around PAP, and I did my degree and dissertation on it as well. And I've always found it's been quite beneficial for me. Get the body movement, get my kind of plyometric power portion in the week towards the end of the week, and it primes me nicely for a Saturday. Now that's me. If I've got athletes that are wanting to pack on some size, then it may be a case of putting in some filler sessions in earlier on in the week where you can get some more volume. If they want total strength, then we may go an upper lower Monday, Tuesday, rest on a Wednesday, and then they may do a full body on a Thursday and rest on Friday. But it really does depend. I don't think you need many or much more than kind of 3 gym sessions in season. I think if you're training twice a week and playing on a Saturday, then 3 is going to be more than that. I think if you're doing too much, it will then take away from your sport. So having that, I think, I'm a big believer in probably going away a little bit from like that block periodization where you just focus on one outcome for a period of time during the season. I think you can kind of stumble quite early there. So I like going that sort of undulating of having some volume, strength, and power. I don't know if you heard of like Cal Dietz and his triphasic training.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we did a lot of that, or we actually implemented it after lockdown at Chiefs within the academy, and we did it in pre-season just to see how the boys reacted. And we went on a Monday was more of our kind of eccentric loading day, so a heavy day. Our Wednesday was our isometric day, and then isometric on the Monday, eccentric on the Wednesday, and then we had our like concentric power day on the Friday. And we found it worked really well. Boys were kind of managing training load throughout the week, not getting too sore, but then they felt really good come a Saturday game. So just having a little play around, find what
Mhm.
works for the individual. I'm a big believer in not one program fits all. So you've got to kind of see what works for that person, what their goals are. And when you're in a team setting, that's really hard because you write a program, you go, right, this is the program, you boys are sticking to this, but not everyone's the same, so you've got to be able to adapt and excuse the pun. But yeah, you've got to really be able to think on your toes and actually, what does this person need? Do they need more strength in their week? Actually, okay, rather than a volume day on a Monday, they're going to have 2 or 3 main lifts where they go up some real strength. So long waffle there, but I think yes, it really does depend on the individual and the sport and where they are in season. are they in season, pre-season, off season, because it's gonna change throughout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think going back to your first initial split, what you mentioned about your own training. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I was smiling as you said it because that's literally a program I've just written for one of our lads, Jack.
Yeah,
And the idea being that we're going to go back into Saturday games this weekend, and my thoughts took me to the same place. Essentially, Monday being, well, I think actually one of the points that I thought was good is you said how you might do more of a hypertrophy type day on a Monday. You might do more of a strength bias on a Wednesday, and then a little bit more of a taper or a primer or a potentiation type session on a Friday. And one of the good takeaway points for people listening there is not every session is a gut wrencher. You're not going in every single day trying to fuck yourself up. Like, we call it undulation, and you may have heard that term before, but this up and down of training intensities where you're trying to elicit a certain response in that session. And I think that's really important for you to get your head around. And you'll know this, like, the ideal scenario is not that you go in on a Friday and do 5 sets of 10 on squats and RDLs and Nordics, because you're going to be sore for the Saturday. So taking that same approach and thinking about where your key focus opportunities are within that week is really important. And the first one should be, okay, the number one thing we want to be good for is that Saturday game. Okay, so let's work back from that. What does the Friday look like if I want to be performing maximally on that Saturday? So I thought that was really interesting. And I personally, for the most part, will go 3 full body sessions as well. Depending on the communication with the athlete is, if I think back to the session or the program that I just wrote, Monday was our heavier day, and that's what we went with. We went with squats and RDLs actually, and this was based off a discussion with him where he was saying, I want to get it out of the way quick. I don't want to let the Tuesday interrupt me never squatting. Okay, so a slightly different take on it. And I said, okay, knowing that, we probably need to build into this a little bit slow. Okay, I don't want you going in and maxing out or doing a silly amount of reps and volume, because that Tuesday is going to come round, and if that's a big session, we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot a little bit. So it's being aware. And then the Wednesday, very similar. If we didn't hit a split squat and more kind of leg kill type movements for the hamstrings on the Monday, we're going to hit them on that Wednesday. So we're basically trying to tick a lot of these boxes which we've mentioned before, of squat, hinge, push, pull, all that. And then the Friday is more more of a peaking type session with a bit of arms. We use that as an opportunity to feel good, get in and just lug some weight. One of the things we did add with this chap as well was the idea that we want to try and get a decent amount of sprint work for him personally. And off of his scheduling of working 9 to 5, he doesn't love having every single one of his evenings taken up. Okay. So we want to try and build that around his lifestyle a little bit. So one of the things we've done with him is, can you get to the rugby session early? Can you get there 30 minutes before the warm-up starts? Because that is going to be a really good opportunity for you to go in, do your wall drives, do your A-skips, do your technical bits that makes you feel really nice and explosive. And let's hit some accelerations. Let's hit 10 reps of 10-meter sprints with 60 seconds rest in between. Then let's go into some 30s, 3 sets of 30-meter sprints off of, 3 minutes rest. Boom, that'll take you 30 minutes. You tick that box, because you might not actually get a decent amount of sprint work in your week if you don't do it there. And we put that on a Tuesday. The reason why I put that in on a Tuesday is because if we don't hit it on a Tuesday, we can move that and get it done on a Thursday. If you put it in on a Thursday and you don't get it done on the Thursday week, you've got nowhere else to put it then. So there was a lot there in our programming that was more based around, okay, let's fit this around you as an athlete. And I think that's super important for people to think about.
Yeah, mate, I totally agree. It's one thing that I went to a camp. I went to an England 20s rugby camp, and they were down here, so they invited us in, and it was a real eye opener. They were at Lympstone Marine Camp, which was great. So getting put through the paces, and then they trained at Sandy Park Post. So we were there just watching the session. Now, they were doing their speed work prior to training, going into their team sessions. So they did that first of all, which was great, because it was all actually some real technical bias, and then actually let the leashes off, let's run fast. and it was really, really good to see. And that's something that I do with a lot of my athletes, and very similar to you, is actually kind of just give them a little reminder that if you're going to do your speed, let's do it on a Tuesday if we can. We're going to be pretty fresh. We shouldn't be too sore. And then also one thing that I really took was actually, when can I program in my heavy eccentric hamstring, which isn't going to take away from their training on a Tuesday or a Thursday. Now, Monday, I'm not going to do it on Monday because I don't want them being sore going into probably their main training day on a Tuesday. Do I do it on a Thursday or a Wednesday? No, because they're training again on Thursday. Thursday evening's probably too close to game day. They're still going to be sore. So I started doing it on so I just programmed some partner manuals or some partner Nordics. And this is like real minimal dose, but it was a real good way to kind of get that in the week and not take away from anything else. Because they did it, and I thought that's a great idea. Where can I do that with my athletes, and when's it best going to fit? So I do it on a Tuesday post training. So I get a lot of my boys to potentially do 2 sets of 3 partner Nordics, and it was a great win. And making sure that boys are always going to get soft tissue injuries, and I'm not saying Nordics are going to stop that, but they may play a part in stopping it and being able to go, actually, if they do have a hamstring injury, what have I done? Well, what have I missed? If I've missed Nordics out, it might be a case of actually, how can I get it in and fit in the week and do some bits like that. So a little bit like your speed philosophy, which I'll kind of hopefully remind them to do on a Tuesday, but actually, can we get some heavy hamstrings in? I don't know where you would do yours, but I've always found like a Tuesday post training to be quite a good one, unless they've been absolutely flogged on the pitch and they're not going to get anything from it. Then I'll stay away from that.
Yeah, mate, exactly the same, to be honest with you. And I don't want this to seem like we're just repeating each other's stuff, but it genuinely works. Like, after a Tuesday, it's a good opportunity because it's probably going to be your furthest time duration away from when you're next going to hit hamstrings hard, so it just makes sense. So yeah, I would get it done straight after a Tuesday, if I'm honest with you. And if there's any kind of individual injury work that we're trying to work on, creating like a little bit of a robustness circuit out of it is a good idea as well. Whether that's something for neck, whether it's for shoulders, turn it into a 10 or a 15-minute block that some of the boys can do together. I think it's a really good opportunity to do that. I did that with a lot of athletes actually, and combat sports as well. Do it with the American football guys. The thing with stuff like that is, I feel, if you're an individual athlete, and you're working with an online coach, so you're working with one of us two or whatever, it can get a little bit faffy, and you are going to have to figure this out. There's going to be some problem solving, because when all the other boys are going back into the showers, they're going straight to the pub, and you're the silly bastard still on the pitch trying to do Nordics by yourself. It can be a little bit of an awkward one. So you may just have to convince somebody. You've got to make it happen if you believe it. And yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of faff in stuff like this, and training itself is a faff. Let's be honest. But if you're going through all this effort of training 3 times a week on top of your rugby, and you highlight that something is super important, just get it done. Like it's as simple as that, really. So let's move on from that one then. And this is probably one of our final questions. Actually, is how to judge how much gym you should do when you're playing rugby. And we've kind of answered that a little bit, but let's dig into that as a specific question then. So how to judge how much gym you should do when you're playing rugby?
It's a good question. I think it's very much having that balance, and you kind of got to reverse engineer it with regards to how do you feel, how's the body feel, how's your training going, how are you feeling when it comes to training evenings, how do you feel when you get to a Saturday game. Now, if you're feeling good, then you're probably doing something right, hopefully, or you're maybe not doing quite enough. But it's that real fine margin of being able to not put yourself at risk of picking up niggles or picking up injuries, and then being ready for Saturday games and feeling good in training. Because at the end of the day, the coaches always used to say to me, your best ability is your availability. And if you're flogging yourself in the gym too much and you're not being able to train and you're picking up niggles, then it may be a sign that you need to kind of pull back on it. But I really go off feel, go off performance, and kind of reflect that as well. So again, it depends on what you need. but overdoing it, I think you can always crash and burn quite quickly. So it's making sure that your gym work is actually paying dividends and improving your performance. If it's not, that's when you probably need to kind of reassess. And if it's really affecting how you feel on a Tuesday and a Thursday and then leading into Saturday, that's when you probably need to kind of speak to someone and outline your week. I always find sometimes, I remember when I was real young and, gym, I just want to get big. But you write down what you're doing in a week and all of a sudden you're doing 6 sessions a week. And, I have clients come to me and go, yeah, so I do 6 sessions a week. So I'd like to do 6 or 7 with you. And then obviously I train on Tuesday, I train on Thursday, and then train on Saturday. And I'm like, Jesus, you're going to be doing 9-10 sessions a week. It's going to be way too much. You're just going to crash and burn and you're not going to get what you want out of it. So it's I don't like being too conservative because I like to be able to push my athletes and go, actually, what can they take? But it's very much going, monitor yourself, see how you feel day to day. If you're too sore going into a Tuesday session, then it may be a chance to pull back. But again, I hate to say it depends, but it really does depend on what that individual is going for and what stage of the season it's in. Now, I'd expect people to be gymming more probably in the off season, and I know the off season's the downtime, but if you really want to get some adaptation, it's the perfect time. It's that window of opportunity to really go after something, and then it's probably going to taper off going into the in season, because guess what? The main things of sport, we're just talking about rugby here. The main things of sports, let's keep that the main thing, and let's not make our gym take away from that. So that's probably my take on it, George. Like, I don't know about you, but I think it is all about kind of managing your body and knowing what you want to get out of the gym first of all. I know it's a little bit of a boring answer, but there's no kind of one answer for it.
And mate, and that sums it up. That is the question there and then. Is like, it's what do you want to get out of the gym? I think it's being very clear with your expectations, because what you mentioned earlier was when you first started going to the gym, you played a bit of rugby, but ultimately you just wanted to get massive. So getting massive might have been your number one thing. In which case, okay, let's work towards that and play a bit of rugby secondary. We can then start to play in, the idea of, I just like being in the gym. I like doing that. I like being there. Okay, cool. Then you might train 4 or 5 times a week, but we need to be conscious of how much volume and intensity we do. I have a few guys that we will train 5 times a week. So if we're working off a traditional Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, well, his schedule will usually be a Monday, full body. Tuesday, we'll get there in the morning, we'll do some low intensity conditioning and a bit of a stretch, bit of mobility. It's really restorative, it's really nice, and it's good for the engine. Wednesday, we hit a full body. Thursday, we do the same thing. Okay. Friday, we hit that primer. So I think figuring out what it is you want. Do you want to be massive and play a bit of secondary rugby? Do you want to attack rugby and be the best athlete possible? Because then that's going to influence your decisions. And this is one of the things I kind of struggled with a little bit initially, actually, when I first started coaching rugby players, was me almost imposing what I thought they should be doing without actually having that conversations, with them as a university rugby team. Okay, are you going to win the Rugby World Cup? Or actually, let's be honest, are you just trying to pull on a Wednesday night, and you just really enjoy the social? And I think having those conversations is super important, because it will dictate what you want. But I think some of the really nice points that you mentioned there are you getting the results you want based off of your current training split? That's essentially it. Are you putting on weight? Are you getting bigger? Cool. If not, then we need to renegotiate. But yeah, any final points on that one, mate?
Yeah, I think that probably alludes what you've just said about their goals and buying and getting that, is actually having that conversation and going, look, it almost leads back to our sports specific conversation and that last point that you made around, actually, look, I want you to do these 3 pillars of exercises within this session. If you do these for me, I'm happy to give you some chest and guns at the end for a little bit of a pump up, or happy to add in some banded sports specific stuff. And it's finding that kind of that happy medium, and you got to give and you got to take a little bit back as well. I think just probably going back to how do I know if I'm doing too much, and going back to almost those 3 full body sessions. Now they're going to be my 3 pillars. So those are the 3 priority sessions. But if you're your goal is to improve your engine, then you can get some real easy wins by adding those little filler sessions. It may be conditioning if it's size. I may add in a 2 pump sessions that are going to take 20 minutes, but you're going to elicit some hypertrophy response, and it's not going to take away from anything. So whether that is, again, like you said, on a Tuesday morning, they can get in the gym for 20 minutes. It's not going to take too much away. It's not going to result in them having to get up extra early to do it. But they can go in, do a little circuit for 20 minutes to get either a conditioning response or some mobility or some hypertrophy. They may do an upper body pump on a Thursday morning. They may do a little bit of a lower body pump on a Tuesday morning. It may be robustness. I think as long as you've got kind of 3 pillars, and then you can kind of fill the gaps with it. But it's really understanding that kind of fatigue model and making sure you're not going over the edge that you're going to crash and burn too early.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think that conversation piece at the beginning is really important. And I was actually thinking through a conversation I had pretty early on in my career around bench press. So I was bench pressing with my athletes, and somebody came up to me and they was like, "Well, you shouldn't bench press." And I was like, "Okay, explain that to me. Why should I not program bench press?" And they gave the arguments, and I'm all on board with how certain people probably shouldn't bench press because it doesn't suit how they're made up. All that I'm on board with it. And this coach said, "Well, you shouldn't because internally rotated positions. You've got blah blah blah, whatever the argument was." And I said, "Yeah, but if I don't program it in this session under the supervision of me, teaching them how to do it properly and how to be safe and effective and use the correct muscles and do all that, they're going to go upstairs straight after this session and they're going to bench press anyway." So not only have we, not given them the opportunity to do that well, is I've also double loaded them because I've just done my weighted press ups that you've recommended that I do. And then they've gone and bench press, and now you've double whammied it, and I'm not aware of what that second whammy was. So it's really interesting trying to manage people is such an underrated thing. It's not just what is the best exercise for rugby. It's like, well, okay, what is the best exercise for rugby based on the person you've got in front of you, based on their goals, based on their logistics and their equipment. It's an art. It really is an art.
I think it comes down to like that education point of view as well. Like some people will not believe the rest to grow, and they just don't believe the rest and recovery. And I remember being at Chiefs, and we have the kind of academy set up, and we have our 3 main sessions in the week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or on Monday, Tuesday, and Friday because they're playing on Wednesdays. But we would go up to the main site, and we go into the college gym, and we'd see all the rugby lads in there, and they were just banging bench, banging arms, and we're like, "Oh God, we're gonna have to do something about it. We're gonna have to do something about it," because that was me 5 years ago, and I know exactly what they're doing. They want to look good, and they want to fill their t-shirt out. They're 16 to 18-year-old lads, and they want to look good. So the thing was actually we put on an open gym session down the bottom and go, "Look, lad, you got chest and guns, but we're going to put a little bit of a cap on it." At least they kind of got that hit out in the gym, but it was kind of under our control. And again, it always comes back to the education point of view. I remember being working in that, and I still work with some college athletes at the moment, mainly women's rugby. I don't know, have you coached many female athletes? I find they're really receptive to gym work, and they're great to work with. And it comes down to the education. As soon as you kind of educate them and give them the reason why, and then you have conversations with what they want to improve on, they come around pretty quick, and they start to listen and go, "Actually, right, maybe we should just do what Harry says." And then as long as he sees that we're doing that, then we can start to put in our stuff as well. So I think it always comes down to that coach-athlete relationship and just building that education process and almost trust as well, isn't it? It's making sure that the athletes trust you, because if they have no respect for you, then they're not going to want to do what you say anyway.
Yeah, 100%, mate. And I'm going to paraphrase what you basically said there, but blokes are fucking stubborn, and we 100% are. And I genuinely, like, my missus, she'll be smiling at me saying that. I think she's just coming from work, and if she heard me say that, she'll be buzzing. I'll have that on a birthday card. But yeah, exactly right, mate. Love it. Cool. I think that's a really nice point to wrap up on, mate. I just want to thank you for your time. This has been absolutely sick, and I know there's going to be a shitload of value in there for people and rugby players and even just coaches that are involved in this space. Where can people find you if they don't already know where you're at?
So Instagram's the main one, just at Train Right Performance. Pretty active on there. And again, I've kind of niched off from more rugby content. So loads of training, a little bit of education tools, and hopefully they can take that into their own training and learn some bits as well. But yeah, mainly Instagram.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we got a Facebook page, and we've also got a website coming out as well. So yeah. Thanks.
Beautiful.
George,
I'll put all that in the show notes below if people. Go on.
I did today. Thanks for having me on, mate. It's been great to kind of chew the fat and chat some S&C nosy topics.
Classic. Yeah, thank you very much, mate. I'll put all that information in the show notes below so people can just click straight through. But yeah, once again, mate, thank you for your time. That was sick.
Cheers, mate.